Benazai Omer, Havi Rotz Mitzvah Kalo, Kibchamuro. You should run to a seemingly less important mitzvah as a mitzvah which is more severe. Now let's understand. The Torah tells us that if one honors his parents, his father and his mother, you will merit longevity. And the Talmud explains to honor a parent appropriately or properly, very difficult. But if you do it, you merit arichas yomim, long days. And the Gemara means, what does long days means? It's exceptional share in the world to come. In long days means the world where it's the world of eternity. And what happens if you come upon a mother bird that's nesting on its chicks or on its eggs, and you want to take the eggs to the chicks? You should first send away the mother bird, and then only afterwards take the chicks or the eggs. And if you do this, what do you merit? You merit arichas yomim. Literally, verbatim, what you merit for honoring a parent. So what do we have here? We have a mitzvah with this no cost factor, financial cost factor. Sending away the mother bird. You come upon a bird, ownerless, send the mother away, take the eggs of the chicks, you merit eternity. It's a moment, no cost factor, easy. To honor a parent, it's one of the most difficult mitzvahs to do it properly, and there's a cost factor. There's a financial outlay to accommodate their needs. So do we understand the value of a mitzvah? Here, the most difficult and the most simple mitzvah, where it says equivalent reward. So how do we understand it? Oh, you don't. You don't know Matan Schor mitzvahs. We have no idea what the actually payoff, the reward for mitzvahs are. So therefore, but people in their own minds, we have our own measuring rod. We have our own evaluation system. Seems to me it's not such an important mitzvah. That's a more important mitzvah. So Benazai says you should pursue an ordinary mitzvah that you perceive as light, not important, no less than you pursue the more severe mitzvah. Before we even start discussing it, there's a portion in Dvarim, it's called Akev. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Jewish people, Megiv Tishmun. If you observe the mitzvahs from A to Z, you'll merit the ultimate bounty in the material. So Rashi cites the Midrash. In Hebrew, the word Okev means the heel. The reason why Yaakov was called Yaakov is because when he was born, the second child, he was holding onto the heel of his brother. That's why he was called Yaakov. In Ekev Tishmun, it says in Tishmun, if you listen, if you heed the mitzvahs and do them correctly, you merit everything. So Rashi cites Chazal, in Ekev Tishmu, if you observe even the mitzvahs she'odom dash ba'kevov, if you observe even the mitzvahs that people trample on with their heels and they ignore or they abuse, and you do those, then you merit the ultimate. So I always ask the question, is it because the mitzvah that's neglected, it's like God favors the underdog, because the mitzvah is neglected, and if you value the mitzvah that's neglected, that gives you special value. Is that the understanding? That's why if you would address the mitzvah, you address the mitzvah that other people they trample on with their heels, which is an indication of how they don't value it, and you do, you will merit the ultimate. Or it's like this, this is the correct understanding. What do we pick and choose? This is more important, this is less important. Everybody has his own measuring rod. If God says every one of the positive commandments which has relevance to you, you must observe. So God wants everyone to be observed. So what do you mean? This is less important, that's more important. But if God says, it's my will to do all of them, there's no such thing as more or less important. How do you have a right to pick and choose where the master says you must do with them all? The answer is, because when we do mitzvahs, the question, is it worth my while? It's not because you're fully doing it because God wants you to do it. If it's purely based on it's God's will, you make no discernment whether more important, less important. They're all equally important. Why they're all equally important? Because God says you must do it. And if God says you must do all of them, he didn't say this, yes, that, not. So evidently, you're using your own measuring rod to make this evaluation. It's only because there's a self-interest. It's a shlo b'shmo. You're not doing it with the right intent, because if it's the right intent, there's no difference between what you consider more or less. There's no such thing as more or less, because every one of them is the will of God. Therefore, that's what the Torah says. Do the mitzvah even that other people neglect. Well, why are you doing the mitzvah that people neglect? Because to you, it's not based on your evaluation. If it's God's will, I do God's will. If you do it for the right reason, then you merit everything. You merit unlimited bounty. That's what the Torah is saying. Benazi says, you should pursue even an ordinary mitzvah, a light mitzvah, a seemingly unimportant mitzvah, no less than a more severe mitzvah. Why? Why should you? So if you speak to the person who's a novice, he said, because you really don't have the ability to make that evaluation. Give you an example. Person has been in the diamond line for 50 years, 60 years, and he's an expert on rough or expert on diamonds. So to him, every diamond, based on its size, its clarity, its color, is unique, and therefore that determines its value. A person who's a novice, it's a stone. This stone, that stone. So a stone, why should it cost as much? The answer is, if you would only understand the quality and the purity and the size and the cut, and whatever it is, you'd understand why it's valuable. Because it's one of a kind of stone. But you don't understand. To every stone, it's all the same stone. You don't understand why is this more expensive than another stone. Even though one may be larger, but that doesn't determine value. It's qualitative value. Every stone, every mitzvah is invaluable. You know why? Because God says you have to do it. So therefore, there's no such thing as mitzvah kal, mitzvah chamura. It's irrelevant. Even though it may be true, but it's not relevant to the whole discussion here. I do it because God says you must do it. So therefore, if you do it for that reason, you merit the ultimate. Therefore, if you do the mitzvah that people trample on with their heels, which is total neglect, you merit. Because why didn't you make that discernment, that differentiation? Because you don't do it, your approach is not what other people's approach is. You don't take out your own measuring rod to make that evaluation. But Nazay says, how they rush the mitzvah kalo chamura. You should run to do a mitzvah, even what seems to be kalo, less important, as if a more severe mitzvah. Why? One second. Uberech min aveira. You should run to do a simple mitzvah as a more severe mitzvah. And you should flee from a sin. So the commentators ask, when we speak about mitzvah, we speak a more severe sin, more severe mitzvah, less severe mitzvah. When we speak about sin, we're not saying you should flee from a severe aveira. Now, why is an aveira, a sin called aveira? What's the meaning of the word transgress? Transgression. You've crossed the line. Aveira means you've crossed the line. You have no right to cross that line. God drew that line in the sand. You're not permitted to cross the line. Crossing God's line, there's no such thing as more severe, less severe. It's unforgivable. Therefore, when we speak about Aveira, transgression, there's no such thing as less severe, more severe. They're all very severe, extremely severe. Pursue mitzvah kala k'mechavura. We're talking about a person says, it's not worth my while. I'll give you an example. You ever read about Bloomberg? He's a buddy of Larry's. He really originally started, I don't know how many years ago, and he worked in the stockroom. And he's worked his way up from the stockroom to where today he's one of the wealthiest people in the world. He worked his way up. Bloomberg. He'd say, I should work in the stockroom. Now, many years ago, I think it was Bernard Baruch. So, of course, Bernard Baruch was the real estate mogul in the United States. He lived in New York, and he had a chauffeur limousine. And the chauffeur used to drive him around, and he would sit in the back seat, and he was involved in doing business. He had people, he would negotiate deals. And he would hear literally the most insider information you could imagine about the stock market or real estate. So this chauffeur was no fool. So whenever he would get these tidbits of information, a little bit of money he invested. Eventually he became a rich man. Why? I mean, you're going to be a driver, you're going to be a chauffeur, you're going to be a cabbie. You don't understand. When I sit in that seat and I overhear these conversations, you know what it's worth? It's worth a fortune. It's not the salary, it's not the job, it's where I'm at. Mitzvah kala, even according to your evaluation, it's not that important. What about if that would be the key, the entry point to go beyond it multiple times over? See, penny wise, pound foolish. Because if you'd only appreciate what this opportunity is, you'd grab it. Because this opportunity will bring you right over the top. You should you should run to do a mitzvah kala. Because once you do the mitzvah kala, that's the key, that's the entry point to take you over the moon. As we'll see in a moment. Aveira, stay away from it. It's meaningless. The moment you develop an addiction, that addiction is going to take you off the cliff. It starts with marijuana. Then you go to something else, and then you go into hard drugs. Eventually become an addict. You lose control of your life. That's borech min aveira, as we'll see in a minute. Why? She mitzvah gereres mitzvah. You may start with a mitzvah kala. You put the $1 or a quarter in the tzedakah box, in the charity box. It's not a big deal, but you did a mitzvah. The way God created this world, when you do a mitzvah, it creates an energy, a dynamic. It spiritualizes the person to bring them to a higher level. So it's not the small mitzvah. The small mitzvah brings you to the greater mitzvah. When you do the wrong thing, it's aver gereres aveira. One sin brings to another. But is it so terrible? Doesn't make a difference. Terrible. It's plenty terrible. Because that has the potential to bring you to a point of no return. Therefore, any sin, you flee from it. You run from it like from fire. That's the understanding. About a very ordinary person. You should run to do a mitzvah kala. Not as I explained it. In the truth, if God commands you, they're all important. There's no such thing as less important, more important. Each one has the same importance because God says you have to do it. But the person who doesn't get it, he's in it for himself. You want to know something? Don't underestimate the seemingly less important mitzvah, because that lesser mitzvah will bring you to the greater mitzvah. You want to meet people. You go to that party, but all the people are ordinary people, but there's going to be 2 or 3 people that are going to be special. And if you could speak to them, then you've scored big. Same idea. You just have to take the initiative to get to those people. But they're available, they're there. When you do the mitzvah kala, it brings you to the mitzvah chamura. Because that's mitzvah gereres mitzvah. One mitzvah brings you to a greater mitzvah. Chaim Volozhiner, in his work, Nefesh Chaim, he cites a Zohar that when we speak about every Jew has a share in the world to come, I mean, when we talk about, it's the equivalent of you have a hotel, you have 3-star rooms, 5-star rooms, 20-star rooms, suites. Is that what it's about? And we speak of Gehenna, spiritual hell. I mean, are there fires burning there? And you go there, the equivalent of it. He explains based on the Zohar, no. When a person does a mitzvah, what happens? Every mitzvah, when you do the mitzvah based qualitatively, the way you do it, it generates a spiritual energy. This energy is literally uncontainable. Therefore, if you have to do the mitzvah, this energy detaches from this existence and goes into a spiritual realm. Because the physical realm is finite. It goes to a spiritual realm which is unlimited. And every time you do a mitzvah, it generates this unlimited force that goes to that location. So a person in a lifetime, a whole lifetime he does mitzvahs, all those energies remove themselves from this existence and they're waiting, they're stored in this other existence. However, there's a trace of that energy which remains with the person to motivate him to do more of the same, and even to bring him to greater levels of mitzvah. This is the Zohar. When a person sins, he creates a negative force. That negative force is an addiction. That negative force is uncontainable. The majority of the negative force is removed from this existence, goes to a higher realm, the spiritual realm. And all the sins a person does throughout his lifetime, they're removed from this existence and they go to the other location in the spiritual realm. But there's a trace of the sin, which is the equivalent of an addiction, and you become addicted to what? To sin. And that draws you to do more sin. This is the concept of mitzvah versus mitzvah. One mitzvah engenders another mitzvah, and one sin engenders another. I saw something over Pesach. Name it Dod Beauty. He said something phenomenal. You know, we say in the Agora, if you did not say these things, Rabbi Gamliel says that if you did not say these 3 things, one does not fulfill his mitzvah at the Seder. What are the 3 things? And you have it on the Seder plate. Pesach, matzah, morah. Pesach is the Paschal lamb. The matzah is the bread that didn't become leavened when we were driven out of Egypt. And morah, the bitter herbs. Eat the bitter herbs to commemorate how our lives were embittered by the Egyptians. So the Nod of Yehuda, his name was Cheskel Landau, was the chief rabbi of Prague in the 18th century. He asks, seemingly, the order is out of order. Sequentially, it should have said, Moror, Pesach Matzah, right? That's sequentially. We were enslaved in bondage. They embittered our lives. That's the first thing. We commemorated through eating the bitter herbs. Then we had the Pesach before we left Egypt, and we had the matzah on the way out. That's why we eat matzah, to commemorate how we did not prepare for that journey. So he says, but yet that's not the order in the Agora. It's Pesach, matzah, morah. Morah is the last, mentioned last. So he says something phenomenal, and each of us could attest to this. If you come to my restaurant, just give you an example. You walk in, the opulence is not, the decor, the ambience is something not to be believed. And you look at the menu, $3,000 for the main course, for the entree, main course. And then you see what it looks like. It's mamish, it literally, it's a sight to behold, the way it's garnished, the quality of the food. Yeah. You start salivating. You got cutlery on the table with a linen napkin. It's the equivalent of barber's apron. That's how big the napkin is. You got it? Okay? He digs in, he eats the food, it's putrid. Could you imagine? Visually, it looks unbelievable. The ambience, the food, the garnishing, everything. The moment he puts that in his mouth, he's being rushed to the hospital for food poisoning and botulism. They got to neutralize him. Otherwise, he's going straight to the mortuary. He's not making it out here. When the evil inclination gets us to sin, he dresses up that sin, makes it attractive, not to be believed. You're overwhelmed. You can't, it's irresistible. You can't pull yourself away. You ever seen anything like it? And when you taste the sin, it's as sweet as anything. He has the ability to take that botulism and that bacteria-laden food and make it taste like you're eating something that's out of this world. Because that's where it's going to take this guy, out of this world. Okay? And it does. Because if you taste the bitterness immediately, you're not going near it. The evil inclination's out of business. But he's a pro at marketing his wares. He's a pro. He can do window dressing like nobody can do window dressing. The evil inclination. So what happens? So when we were in Egypt, even though they embittered our lives, the physical, but there was also a spiritual embitterment. We became idolaters. The more we got involved in idolatry, the less we appreciated the negative effect of the idolatry. We thought we were in paradise in terms of our involvement in those new beliefs. What happened when we circumcised ourselves and we had the Passover? We started the tshuva process. When you start the tshuva process, all of a sudden, you're reactivating your spiritual taste buds and your spiritual antennas. And now all of a sudden, what you tasted sweet until now you're starting to taste how bitter it is. So therefore, in terms of sequentially, it's bitter, Pesach, matzah, bitter herbs. But the way we experienced it, until we do tshuva, the bitterness is sweet. So it's only if the Pesach Moror, they start tasting the bitterness of the past. It's only in retrospect now you know it's bitter. And it's based on the Zohar. He refers to it as the klipa. The klipa is the husk. The spiritual impurity has the ability to addict you to the point that there's nothing which is equivalent of that in terms of attractiveness, in terms of the experience, one of a kind. Here the Tana writes, Borech ben you should flee from sin like fire. That's before you start sinning. Once you start sinning and you have a taste of it, and you don't do tshuva immediately, you want more of it, and you want more of it, and it keeps building until it takes over your life.
That's a question.
Yeah. No, yes, Larry.